And then how is the defense tech publication staffed?
Right now, what we have is 2 people based in Brussels and then 3 people based in Kyiv. So we have a managing editor, we have a European editor, we have a Brussels reporter, we've got 2 Kyiv reporters.
And what's the significance of Brussels?
So what we wanted to do as we expanded was to cover not just Ukrainian defense technology and regulation, but also European defense technology and regulation. So our expansion from Ukraine, our next natural step was to go to Brussels. And so that's where we've got 2 folks, and we're looking to Berlin next.
Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. The war in Ukraine has given rise to an entirely new generation of independent media organizations, but few have a backstory as unusual as the Counteroffensive. Founded by veteran journalist Tim Mak after more than a decade covering politics, national security, and investigations for outlets like NPR, the publication began as a one-man Substack chronicling the life inside wartime Ukraine. In just a few years, it has evolved into a growing media company with multiple publications, a team of reporters across Europe, and an expanding portfolio that spans consumer journalism, defense intelligence, and post-war reconstruction. In our interview, Mak explained how an unexpected career pivot led him to launch a newsroom from Kyiv, why he believes text-based journalism, not podcast or video, remains the strongest engine for paid subscriptions, and how he's building a diversified media business designed to outlast the war itself. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, gently tap on that subscribe button so you can watch more interviews with the world's most successful media entrepreneurs. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate it.
So super excited to talk to you. You and I met like a year or 2 ago when you were in DC. You told me about this amazing publication that you're running and your decision to move to Ukraine and basically just start an investigative journalism outlet covering what was happening, especially during the Ukraine war. I know that you also have like a spin-off publication that covers, the kind of burgeoning defense tech industry that's kind of sprung up around the Ukraine war. We'll get into all that. First, I just want to hear the origin story for the publication and maybe even just start a little bit about like talking about what your background was before that. Because you actually, even though you're a media entrepreneur, you have a very strong traditional journalism background. I think you were at NPR, maybe a few other places. Can you just give us like a quick rundown of like what your journalism background was before that and like what your beat was and stuff like that?
Sure. So I worked for about 15 years in Washington, D.C. for a variety of publications, including Politico, The Daily Beast, and NPR. And over that period, I specialized in a few things: campaign politics, national security, and then investigative reporting, so accountability reporting. And did those things for a little bit of time. Took a bit of a career detour in the middle there, and I joined the U.S. Army, became a medic in both a conventional unit and then a special operations unit as well.
What year was that?
So I joined in 2017 and I got out in 2022.
And
so I did this.
What motivated that?
Well, to be honest, it was a little bit of kind of creeping cynicism about the nature of media. So I'd covered the Trump campaign in 2015, 2016 quite closely. Felt like I had done some amazing accountability journalism or strong accountability journalism. And it didn't feel like it really had much of an impact at all. I'd worked my heart out for 2 years and thought, maybe it's time to go and do something else. Learn how to do something with my hands that is a total departure from what I'm doing on the journalism side. And so I joined the West Virginia Army National Guard and went off to be to become a combat medic. And did that. So after training, I did that on the reserve side while I was a correspondent at NPR.
Yeah, so like the way that it works is if like you like I don't know if it's like one weekend a month or what the actual cadence is, but you're able to maintain a full-time career and then they call you in on a regular basis. And then if there's some kind of emergency or something like that, then they can call you on a more sustained basis, basically, right?
Right. So I'd be, weekdays working at NPR and weekends I'd be drilling in West Virginia, come back, start work again Monday morning, and then in the summers it would be 2-3 weeks. That would be the general cadence. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you were at NPR this time, were you still doing kind of general, like government accountability reporting? Did you have a more specific beat at this point?
So the first couple of years I was at NPR, I covered Congress, and then the next half of my period at NPR, I was on the investigative team, leading some of our political investigations work.
Mm-hmm. And so, what did you feel like you got out of the National Guard thing? Like, did it give you a new understanding of how the military works? Like, what did that do for you?
Of course it did, but it gave me a better sense of a slice of America that I just would never have come into contact with normally. Getting out into the middle of West Virginia, for example, and going there every month and talking to those people. Politics inevitably comes up, right? The way you think about your life and your potential and your career and society is a natural topic that comes up as you're drilling that, and that just gave me a totally different view of America that I wouldn't have gotten in DC. Among largely college-educated people, I joined it as an enlisted soldier. So that is, many enlisted soldiers do not have college degrees. So it was a different socioeconomic slice of society as well as a different geographic and political slice of society than I normally would be used to. So that was a really interesting period of time where I got to see Trump country, in West Virginia, as it developed over time, and gave me some antenna into really red state politics and a different way of looking at the country.
So the pandemic happens. When did Russia invade Ukraine?
2022.
2022.
So
okay.
What happened was I got out of the Army in January 2022. And, during the period that I'm in the military, I'm not allowed to travel abroad without permission, right? So this happened at a period in February 2022. NPR is looking to put together a team to go to Ukraine just in case a war might break out. And I get tapped as part of that. And just by total coincidence, I land in Kyiv the night the invasion begins. And long story short, I've been based out of Kyiv ever since.
Yeah. So you're like recording dispatches and sending them to NPR, and they're playing your segments on like all things considered and stuff like that.
Yeah. But what complicated things was, of course, we were on the run for the first few days of the invasion. There were Russian troops approaching the city. We are part of a huge exodus trying to get out of Kyiv before it's surrounded. It was a very dramatic period of time. And then, we're filing on satellite phones. We're using our cell phones to call into shows. I mean, it was a very, it's a period of my life I'll never forget.
And so walk me through kind of your state of mind during that time as you're thinking about what's going on in the Ukraine. I don't know if you felt like some kind of emotional connection to what was happening there, what was going through your mind working at NPR, like what was kind of the transformation that started to happen to where you decided you wanted to launch your own independent media outlet?
I don't know, Simon. I mean, I think that you're giving me a little bit too much credit in that I was thinking at a very early stage in this sort of 40,000-foot bird's eye strategic view, and it didn't really happen that way at all. I was one of the reporters who reported in Ukraine in real time as the war was unfolding. But what I found that was resonating with people was actually some of the stuff that didn't make it into the formal segments, some of the observations, some of the human interest stories, some of the stuff that we would normally call the notes in our reporters' notebooks, the stuff you write down, the scenes you see. They don't really make sense for a lot of more formal reporting. I would just tweet it out and put it out there, and people really connected with that. And so we approached 2023, and NPR is going through a round of layoffs. And while I wasn't laid off, a colleague and friend was. And I just decided to take that person's place in the layoffs and see if I could start something new. To call it a publication at first is maybe a little bit overstating it. The original plan was to go do some freelancing in Ukraine, and hey, why not start a Substack while we're at it and see if that can be doable? And it started to pick up some steam. The team started to grow, and one thing led to another. Now we have 4 different publications. We raised investment from Robert Albritton, one of the original founders of Politico. We've got dozens of folks working with us in locations all around the world. And so it's really become an actual business. But it was never originally the intention. I couldn't have imagined how it would grow and build.
Yeah. So just to recap what you said, so your colleague was getting laid off. You somehow signaled to NPR, don't lay off this person, lay off me instead. And then you were like, I'm going to stay in Kyiv, as I don't know the correct pronunciation.
It's Kyiv. It's Kyiv.
Yeah. And you're just going to freelance, and obviously there was a lot of media attention on Ukraine at that point, so you probably could have gotten a lot of assignments, but you also decide as kind of like an anchor base, I'm going to launch this Substack newsletter called the Counteroffensive. Obviously, there was a lot of global sympathy at that point. I would warrant a guess that it's a good story that an NPR reporter quit their job and launched a Substack, and you maybe had a surprising amount of response in terms of people signing up for your newsletter and stuff because it was kind of perfect timing. Would that be correct to surmise?
I don't know about perfect timing. I think that in 2023, already some of that sympathy was starting to wane. I think if the company had started in 2022, it would be an even bigger company. But I'm not complaining by any means, and I probably wasn't ready to start that in 2022. So it worked out as best it could.
Yeah, but it seemed. But was there because there was a lot of tension? Did you get a lot of signups very quickly for it?
Yes, but I think we got that initial boost, and then but we've grown significantly since then.
Yeah, and did you turn on paid subscriptions right away, or was it just kind of like a free newsletter to kind of point people to what you're reporting elsewhere?
Initially, everything was free, but there was the paid option, and a lot of people just signed up paid just to support the initiative. And over time, more an occasional post. Right now, we're aiming for 1 out of every 3 stories is paywalled.
And so, if I had signed up for this newsletter in those first few months, what would that have looked like? It was just you writing for it at that point, right?
Yeah, just me trying to get 2 or 3 stories out a week, basically on my own, obviously in collaboration with my Ukrainian colleague who served as an interpreter and fixer.
And were you mainly in Kyiv during that point? Were you traveling around? What were you doing as a reporter?
We tried doing more and more travel. The thing is, there's just not a lot of time. It's a big country. There are no flights. You have to drive in everywhere or take a train. Doing that along with 3 stories a week on your own, plus social media, plus trying to grow the business was extremely difficult. So what ended up happening was building out into reporting on human interest angles and doing narrative journalism, magazine-style journalism, trying to bring a different approach to the kind of storytelling than a more typical mainstream publication might do, focusing first on telling the stories of people as a means to tell the news, as opposed to just saying, hey, this happened here at this time to these types or these groups.
And then you also, I'm sure by that point you had figured a lot of this stuff out, but I'm guessing there were more logistical hurdles to just even very basic reporting in terms of internet connections, being able to reach people on the phone and stuff like that. You and I were talking about you using Starlink before we started the recording. What were some of those things that you had to figure out?
Everything from safety to, in the winters there are severe blackouts. It gets quite cold. Getting batteries, figuring out how to get body armor for people, medical kits and medical training. From the ground up, we had to create standard operating procedures for our editorial side and for safety and security. And so it was just growing a media company from zero. And by the way, with no experience in growing any sort of a company. So there were certainly, and there still are, growing pains, because a lot of this is being done on the fly.
So how did it start going from Tim Mak, writing 3 dispatches a week, you could volunteer to pay a subscription, but you didn't have to turning into a more kind of formal media company? Now
that I think about it, I just kind of, stumbled along and did whatever I could, and I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes along the way. But at a certain point, I'd reached the capacity that I could do by myself. And so we hired our first reporter to help do that reporting. And she's now the managing editor of the Counteroffensive. We brought on other reporters, built that out. And then I realized was that as we're growing out the counteroffensive side, that we wanted to diversify the topics that we reported on. The war could end at any moment. That seemed like a pretty big risk that we would just suddenly collapse in terms of subscriber support. So one thing we got into, and I really relied on the Politico model. So I had worked at Politico, both on the kind of Politico side and the Politico Pro side, their B2B business intelligence side, and coincidentally had helped start the defense coverage at Politico Pro Defense about 15 years ago. I looked around and I realized no one was doing that in Kyiv. And there's an incredible amount of defense business, defense investment, defense technological innovation happening here. And the environment needed this sort of business intelligence. So we launched a publication covering that, which is now called The Arsenal. When the Iran war kicked off, within 24 hours, we did this pop-up news publication called Iran War Dispatches, which focuses on the human interest stories of the Iran war. And we had that based and have that based in Armenia, just next door. And then just in the last few weeks, we launched our 4th publication that's titled Build Back Ukraine. And that's another B2B focused on reconstruction, business, regulation, investment financing, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and just for context, for people who haven't been following this, the war has spurred an entire explosion of new defense tech innovation to the point where you're now regularly seeing pieces in the Wall Street Journal about how this might upend our total understanding of what defense budget should be even spent on, if that these we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on these huge behemoth missile operating systems, and we can now they can be easily outdone and outmaneuvered by drones that only cost a few $100. So it's there's been an entire kind of paradigm shift in how the defense industry thinks about warfare compared to as little as 5 years ago. So you launched a specific B2B outlet that is just covering this kind of burgeoning industry whose primary focus is in the Ukraine, but now it's having increased relevance because Iran is starting to use some of these tactics to outmaneuver the U.S. So what was that? Was that another Substack publication, or how did you kind of structure that kind of spinoff publication?
So functionally, it was a Beehive publication because Beehive allows for a lot more customization. It's much more favorable for a B2B niche outlet. Substack is great for funneling in a large amounts of broad audiences. But in terms of a B2B publication, what you really want it to do is go find your specific niche and gather as much information as you can on them. So on the counteroffensive side, I don't know, for example, where these people work or even what city they live in. We have general ideas, but in order to sign up for the Arsenal, you get asked your name, your email, your job title, your company, and a number of different things that allow us to better use that data to help serve the audience that we have.
Yeah, and a lot of B2B publications do this, and it's primarily for like collecting first-party data that can be sold to advertisers or to show, like the value of your audience, especially for things like webinars and stuff like that, that advertisers would pay a premium for. So the business of the Counteroffensive has been mainly like a primarily subscriptions-based business, correct?
Right.
And how much do you charge a year for that?
$8 a month or $80 a year.
Okay, and then so for the B2B thing, what's the business model for that?
So it's also subscriptions. We don't sell data to advertisers. We do some advertising. For example, NATO, Diana was one of our most recent advertisers. And then the subscription, what we focused on first was growing the base. So for the first year and a half, the Arsenal did not charge a dime for anyone. Earlier this year, we brought on a chief revenue officer, and one of our goals was to put up a paywall and start building our subscriber base, along with other revenue-generating areas of the business.
Yeah, and so who's the typical subscriber for the B2B business? Like, is it just people working in defense and the government, defense contractors, like basically who you would think would sign up for that?
There are folks who need to keep their finger on the pulse of the business and technology of defense. So if they're interested in battlefield technological concepts that we're seeing from the front lines, if they're interested in deal flow or regulations specifically affecting defense tech companies. So that typically is a group of folks like defense innovators, investors in this space, and then defense officials.
Mm-hmm. And so for the Counteroffensive, how has it evolved? Like, so you hired a managing editor. Is it still basically text-based reporting, written reporting, or have you done any podcasting, video? How are you thinking about that?
So our bread and butter is the subscription base, right? So video hasn't, in our view, been a huge driver of the subscription base. So we've done some work on Instagram, and we continue to do that, but it hasn't been a core focus of our publication at the Counteroffensive. We've really focused on the text-based reporting. So we have a managing editor that focuses on making sure the trains run on time. And then we have a creative editor that focuses on the style and tone and quality of the writing and reporting itself.
And like, you were publishing 3 pieces a week before when it was just you. What's kind of like the editorial output now?
It's still about 3 pieces a week. What we find is that people don't want really more than 3 pieces a week, other than breaking news. We'll put out breaking news alerts. But email being what it is, you don't want to overburden your audience and push too often. But I'm sure, as many of your listeners and viewers know, I mean, email is a uniquely positive method of distribution because it's a push type distribution rather than a pull. Are
you mainly happy with staying on Substack for that one?
Yeah, I mean, they've been very good to us, and so what we're planning to do is stay with Substack for the foreseeable future. It makes less sense on the B2B side, but on the kind of broader public side, it makes a lot of sense.
Do you utilize like Substack's tools like Substack Notes, its message board kind of function, all these kinds of things where you could do like a deeper engagement with your audience? Obviously, you can go live, you can record video, stuff like that. Like what in Substack's tool set are you using?
We are using Notes. We are using Lives. I'm trying to think what else we're using. Recommendations on the Substack network has been a major driver of subscriptions. So those are the main ones that come to mind.
So you don't use it's like message board functionality or anything like that?
Like the chat function?
Yeah, it's like I think they call it chat, but it's kind of like almost like Facebook groups or something.
I haven't found a lot of engagement or usefulness in that specific format. We've done some types of chats around specific known events. Like, we held a chat during that disastrous Biden-Trump debate where Biden fell apart and withdrew not long after. So we did a live chat for that one. And it was, in the middle of the night in Kyiv because we're 7 hours later than East Coast time in the U.S. So we're up in the middle of the night hosting this live chat and watching that and writing about it in real time. But there haven't been that many opportunities where it's been super useful to do that.
And then how is the tech or the defense tech publication staffed?
How is it
staffed?
So we have right now what we have is 2 people based in Brussels. And then 3 people based in Kyiv. So we have a managing editor, we have a European editor, we have a Brussels reporter, and we've got 2 Kyiv reporters.
And what's the significance of Brussels?
So what we wanted to do as we expanded was to cover not just Ukrainian defense technology and regulation, but also European defense technology and regulation. So our expansion from Ukraine, our next natural step was to go to Brussels. And so that's where we've got 2 folks, and we're looking to Berlin next.
And you mentioned you have advertising in that publication. What kind of advertising do you do?
So we do advertising. We do text-based advertising, not dissimilar to what you would see in other kinds of newsletters.
Just like native text-based, looks like editorial content, but obviously disclosed.
No, we don't do that sort of. We haven't done that sort of native text-based advertising, but more like you might see in Politico Playbook, sponsored by, clearly designated, messaging by, and so on and so forth. But we haven't done stories written by XYZ organization that we just post as if it were editorial content.
So you mentioned that you've started to get some investments. Talk to me about that. What kind of investors, and then also what is that money kind of being invested, put toward?
Sure. So we only have one investor, Robert Albritton, who, as you'll know, helped co-found Politico and now owns Notice, as well as a number of other different journalistic enterprises. And he's a minority investor, and basically what we did with that was we used those funds to start building out outside of Ukraine. So our Brussels operation started in tandem with that investment. We also were able to bring on a chief revenue officer in order to grow the business side a lot more. Because my expertise, as I mentioned, is on the editorial and journalistic side. So selling advertisements, growing our subscription base, growing out our various revenue streams, holding events and finding sponsors for them. Those are all things that I don't have background in. And so that's what we needed our chief revenue officer for. And
then you said you launched 2 other publications. Can you remind me what those were?
Yeah, one covers the Iran war. It's called Iran War Dispatches. And the other is called Build Back, and it covers Ukrainian reconstruction and the business of it. So one kind of broader public one and one niche business one.
So for the Iran war one, do you think of that as like a pop-up like publication? Because obviously that might be a more finite war than, although at this point it's looking less and less finite. Like, how do you think of that publication?
Yeah, we thought of it as a pop-up. We did we sent some folks to Armenia before the Iran war even started to scout out how we might launch a publication. Because and then when it happened, when the war started, within 24 hours we had our own publication up and running.
And like, how does that help your business to have that publication?
Well, it's a totally different. It's not a totally different audience, but it's an extension of the audience, and it brings in other people who we want to introduce to human interest storytelling.
And so for the reconstruction one, is that like that's another B2B publication, right? And that's kind of targeted towards like what, like developers and things like that?
It same sort of profile, but on the reconstruction topic, right? So investors, people interested in finance, people interested in humanitarian work for the post-war reconstruction. So obviously we're not in a post-war period, but we want to be able to dominate the space editorially once we get there. So we've launched Build Back Ukraine at a monthly cadence, and that will be going on, increasing in cadence as there's more news to cover.
So obviously, like cover or interest in the Ukraine war kind of goes up and down depending on what else is going on in the world. Obviously, the Palestinian-Israel war kind of sucked some of the oxygen out of the coverage there. More recently, the Iran war, but it also seems like because there's been some rise in aggression on both the Ukraine side and the Russia side. Like I know Ukraine made some incursions inside Russia itself, and then I know Russia made a major attack on Kyiv. Like, how do you see that in the numbers, or do you see that in the numbers in terms of like the interest, the signups, the paid subscription conversions? Like, is there like a direct correlation between how much Ukraine is in the news and how much your business like rises or plateaus?
Not a direct correlation. I think I expected over time for us to have a slowly diminishing subscriber base. That hasn't happened yet, knock on wood. Part of that may be, even within the broader community of journalism, Ukraine-based human interest storytelling, that's still a niche. That's still a niche topic, right? And for which you are really looking at a relatively small number of subscribers as compared to a general interest publication. And as Ukraine coverage dipped elsewhere, my hypothesis has been that folks came to us.
So with the hiring of a chief revenue officer, what is the ambition? Is it just being able to get slightly better at subscriptions, slightly better at advertising sales, or are there much bigger things afoot that you're planning to do in terms of, because I think obviously I understand the text based is the best for converting paid subscribers, but obviously there's a lot of short form vertical video drives a lot of online attention, video in general, podcast, stuff like that. Even if they're less directly monetizable, in order to be part of the conversation, obviously they're playing a big part. Are there any plans around trying to expand into new mediums, formats, things like that?
Well, I mean, my fundamental strategic goal is to make sure that we have a sustainable business, right? And building out revenue streams in order to make sure that we're around in 1 year and 3 years, and longer. You and I have spent our careers during a phase of journalistic financial uncertainty, and so that's really affected a lot of the journalists that you and I both know. And my goal is not to build an incredibly profitable billion-dollar business unicorn. My goal is to build a sustainable business that will last for a long period of time, that doesn't need to worry about or take risks that might jeopardize the long-term stability of the people who work here and have put in a large part of their lives to help grow what we've built.
So, but what does that mean though in terms of, like, do you think that there's opportunity for these formats that might not be as directly monetizable?
I've been very skeptical. I've been really skeptical of the Instagram, YouTube side because Instagram as a medium, it's very hard to drive people off of the Instagram platform onto other platforms. And it's very rare. So it's fine as a brand building exercise, but when you're more of a niche publication, it is less helpful. The Washington Post needs to be on Instagram, needs to be on TikTok, and so on and so forth, because they have a very broad audience that needs to know about them and needs to be provided information by them. We have a slightly different series of incentives and a slightly different funnel for our subscriber base. And so we do a lot more searching for people than the Washington Post or the New York Times would need to do.
I would also argue, though, like if you look at like the Bulwark, like a lot of its subscription success has partly come from the popularity of folks like Tim Miller, who really became kind of a superstar as like a video and podcast guy, and that the parasocial relationships created there helped like downstream effects of the driving subscriptions for the Bulwark. I don't know. Do you think about that? Like you as a brand. I don't know if you do a lot of TV hits or stuff like that. Like how do you get people to like connect with you, Tim Mak, and or your other reporters and stuff like that to create that connection that could maybe help you in terms of, creating that more brand affinity for the counteroffensive and make them want to become paid subscribers?
Well, truth be told, it's something we need to work on quite a bit. We tried to, we obviously are part of the story and we write from a first-person perspective from time to time, but our main focus has been, in general, the characters that we're profiling, not how I feel about X, Y, or Z. There's also been the challenge that as the team has grown, I've had less and less and less time to personally be involved in making videos or writing articles or being that person that illustrates the brand. And because I'm drowning in all the stuff that we need to do in order to keep the business running. But we're rethinking that, the degree to which I can be more of an active player and kind of front person for the band, if you will.
So I usually end my interviews by asking the person like to look ahead 3 years and tell me what they think or what they hope to be doing that they're not doing now. I feel like for you, that question has a completely different meaning because of the geopolitical situation that Ukraine is in. 3 years from now, the war could be over. Let's say it is best case scenario. Like, I don't know, I read some of this analysis that says that Russia is losing and that there's the end point is when, not an if. But let's say that's the best case scenario, and a year from now, Russia finally throws in the towel. What does that look like for the counteroffensive? Like, could you envision it ever becoming, like you're sort of already doing it with the defense publication, do you think it could become more of like a broadly European publication, or do you think it's always going to be kind of firmly rooted in Ukraine specifically?
Well, a couple of things. I think we'll be listening to our subscribers to see what direction they'll want to go in. We've already laid some of the basis for expanding beyond Ukraine. I mean, we have regularly covered things from the Syrian-Turkish border or Hungary, or we have a monthly Taiwan issue. So we've branded the counteroffensive as human interest stories from places where democracies are resisting authoritarianism. And we've featured stories from all over the world, from Colombia, from Venezuela, right after the initial U.S. strikes, from, as I mentioned, Hungary and Taiwan, and we'll continue to do those stories. If the war in Ukraine ends, and I hope it ends as soon as possible with the Ukrainian victory, we'll just have to adapt. But this is something we've been thinking about for a long time, which is why we pushed into B2B, which is why we have an Iran war publication, which is why we have a postwar reconstruction publication waiting in the wings, and publishing monthly. So it is something that we've tried to strategize around, but we'll need to work really hard in order to make sure that's sustainable in the long run.
Well, authoritarianism is certainly not going away anytime soon, so I think there will be plenty to cover. I'm waiting for you to launch the Washington D.C. bureau, given what's going on here.
Well, I'm not joking when I say there's a possibility that we'll be based in Taipei, in a couple of years. There's certainly. We've done a number of trips out to Taiwan, scouting for reporters and doing reporting and kind of thinking about how we would build if we had to launch a pop-up in Taiwan, how would we do it and how quickly could we do it?
Okay, Tim, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
Well, if you're interested in the counteroffensive and human interest storytelling, you can find it at counteroffensive.news. And if you're interested in defense technology and the business of defense in Ukraine and in Europe, you can find that at arsenal.eu.
Awesome. Well, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Simon.